Joan Crawford died, and I was disinherited. There was a lot of, sort of nasty, why did she disinherit her children, whatever. In 1928, Joan Crawford bought a Spanish villa that would become Hollywood's most infamous address. For 30 years, it hosted glittering parties and Hollywood royalty. But after her death in 1977, investigators uncovered disturbing truths, paranormal activity, hidden fortunes, and a shocking will that exposed the dark reality behind Hollywood's perfect family. The question wasn't just what happened in that house, but why Crawford's ghost still haunts it today. Joan Crawford's life started with a lot of challenges. She was born on March 23, 1906, in San Antonio, Texas. Her father left the family when she was just a baby. This left her mother struggling, and they lived in deep poverty. By the time Joan was 11, she was working as a laundress to help her family. This showed how strong and hardworking she was, even as a child. When she was 12, Joan had an accident that changed her life. She tried to jump onto a moving car and cut her foot on broken glass. The injury became so bad that doctors thought they might need to cut off her leg. After 3 surgeries, she recovered, but this left her with a fear of infections for the rest of her life. This fear turned into an obsession with cleanliness that she became famous for in Hollywood. At 16, Joan went to Stevens College in Missouri, but after just a few months, she left. She wanted to be a dancer, so she moved to Chicago and joined a chorus line. She performed under the name Billy Cassin and started building her skills as a performer. By 1924, she had made her way to New York City. There, MGM producer Harry Rapf noticed her. He offered her a screen test and a $75 per week contract. On December 24, 1924, she got a telegram that changed her life forever. She borrowed $400 to pay for her trip and went to Hollywood to start her new life. Her Hollywood journey began small. Just weeks after arriving, she worked as a body double for Norma Shearer in the movie Lady of the Night, 1925. In one scene, the camera showed her back for 19 seconds. It was uncredited, but this was her first time on screen. Joan later joked that her debut was funny because she was just playing Norma Shearer's back. In 1925, Joan got her first credited role in Sally, Irene, and Mary. Around that time, MGM decided she needed a new name. They thought Lucille LeSueur sounded too much like Sir, so they held a magazine contest, and Joan Crawford became her new name. That name would later become famous around the world. Her big break came in 1927 with the movie The Unknown. It was a dark and strange story directed by Todd Browning. Joan played a circus performer, Nanan, who was terrified of men's hands. She falls in love with a man pretending to be armless, not knowing his real identity. The movie was a hit, making over $88,000, and critics loved Joan's performance. It helped her get noticed and land bigger roles. In 1928, Joan became a star with Our Dancing Daughters. This movie showed the wild and carefree spirit of the Roaring Twenties. Joan played Diana, a young woman who loved to dance and live life to the fullest. One famous scene had her dancing the Charleston on a table for over 3 minutes. It took 2 days to film, and her feet were bleeding by the end, but she didn't stop until it was perfect. The movie was a huge success, making over $1 million at the box office. Joan's glamorous costumes, including a shimmering beaded dress, became iconic. F. Scott Fitzgerald even called her the perfect flapper, capturing the spirit of the jazz age. Joan Crawford's life in the 1930s was full of change and challenges, but she refused to back down. When silent movies gave way to talking pictures, many stars couldn't make the switch, their voices didn't fit, or they just couldn't adapt. Joan wasn't ready to give up her career, so she worked hard to adjust. She took lessons to improve her voice and practiced constantly. Her effort paid off when her first talkie, Untamed, 1929, became a big success. In Untamed, Joan played Bingo Dowling, a wild woman raised in the jungle trying to fit into society. It was the perfect role for her to show her new skills. She spent hours practicing her lines with vocal coaches and worked long days to make sure everything was perfect. The stakes were high because movies were changing fast, and if she failed, her career might be over. But when the film came out, it was a hit. It made almost $1 million, which was huge, especially since the Great Depression had just started. Critics loved her performance, and her future in Hollywood was safe. Sadly, no copies of the movie exist today, which adds mystery to her impressive debut in talking pictures. Joan didn't just survive in Hollywood, she thrived. By the mid-1930s, she became one of MGM's biggest stars. She had fierce competition with actresses like Norma Shearer and Greta Garbo. Norma Shearer had the advantage of being married to MGM's boss, Irving Thalberg. Joan wasn't happy about it and famously said, "How can I compete with Norma when she's sleeping with the boss?" Even with this disadvantage, Joan's movies often earned more money at the box office. Fans loved her relatable and hardworking image. Her rivalry with Garbo was different. Garbo was seen as mysterious and elegant, while Joan was more accessible and down-to-earth. Both were successful, but Joan's tireless work ethic made her stand out. She showed up early to every set, fully prepared, and gained the respect of everyone she worked with. Some of Joan's most famous films in this period were Grand Hotel, 1932, and The Women, 1939. Grand Hotel was a huge movie with stars like Greta Garbo and John Barrymore. Joan played a stenographer dreaming of a better life, and even though she wasn't the top-billed star, her performance stood out. The movie made millions and won an Oscar for Best Picture. The Women came out later, when Joan needed a comeback. She had been labeled box office poison in 1938, but her sharp and villainous role in The Women proved she could still captivate audiences. The movie was a hit and helped restore her reputation. Joan became known for playing characters who worked hard to rise from poverty to success. These rags-to-riches stories connected deeply with audiences during the Great Depression. Movies like Dancing Lady, 1933, and Sadie Key, 1934, showed women overcoming tough times, which gave people hope during hard economic struggles. In Dancing Lady, Joan played a burlesque dancer trying to make it on Broadway. The movie was a massive hit and even introduced Fred Astaire in his first film role. Sadie Key told the story of a working-class woman climbing the social ladder, and it was so popular it broke theater attendance records. Fans saw themselves in Joan's characters, and her own story of rising from poverty to stardom made her even more inspiring. One of Joan's most famous partnerships was with Clark Gable. They made 8 films together, starting with Dance, Fools, Dance, 1931. Their chemistry on screen was electric, and fans loved seeing them together. In Possessed, 1931, Joan played a factory worker who becomes the mistress of a wealthy man, tackling issues of class and ambition. The movie was a huge hit, making over $1 million. Another big film was Dancing Lady, where Joan's character worked her way up in the entertainment world. Off-screen, Joan and Clark had a romantic relationship which added extra excitement to their movies. Their last film together, Strange Cargo, 1940, showed their chemistry was still strong even after their affair had ended. Together, their films earned MGM over $15 million, making them one of Hollywood's most successful pairs. Joan Crawford's life changed completely in the 1940s. She had been a big star at MGM for 18 years, but by 1943, her career was struggling. MGM didn't believe in her the way they used to. They kept giving her small roles in bad movies, and she felt like they didn't respect her anymore. The final blow came when they gave the lead role in Madame Curie to Greer Garson, a role Joan desperately wanted. She decided she had had enough. At 37, she did something shocking. She paid $100,000 to end her MGM contract. This was a huge risk. Many people thought her career was over because, in those days, actresses her age were considered too old. But Joan didn't give up. Just 2 days after leaving MGM, she signed a new deal with Warner Brothers. This deal gave her $500,000 for 3 movies, which was an enormous amount of money at the time. It also gave her something she had never had before, the right to approve scripts. She wasn't going to waste time on bad movies anymore. For a year and a half, she turned down script after script, waiting for the perfect role. That role came in Mildred Pierce, 1945, a film no one else wanted. Bette Davis and Sheridan and Barbara Stanwyck had all turned it down, but Joan grabbed the chance. Winning the role wasn't easy. The director, Michael Curtiz, didn't want Joan at first. He thought she was too old Hollywood, but Joan fought for it. She agreed to do a screen test, something stars of her level almost never did, and she paid for her own hair, makeup, and wardrobe for it. The gamble worked. She got the part. Filming wasn't smooth. Curtiz had a terrible temper and often yelled at Joan, but she didn't back down. At one point, when he insulted her, she snapped back, and the set shut down until the studio head stepped in. But when the film was finished, it was a huge success. Critics loved Joan's performance, and audiences packed theaters to see it. In 1946, Joan won the Oscar for Best Actress for Mildred Pierce. She didn't attend the ceremony because she thought she wouldn't win. After Mildred Pierce, Joan's career soared. In Humoresque, 1946, she played a wealthy woman in love with a young violinist. Critics praised her, and audiences loved the film. One unforgettable scene, where she walks into the ocean, was filmed over 3 days in freezing water, but Joan insisted on making it perfect. Then, in Possessed, 1947, she played a woman slowly losing her mind. To prepare, Joan visited a mental hospital to study the patients. Her hard work paid off, and she earned another Oscar nomination for her performance. Joan kept pushing forward. In 1952, Joan Crawford starred in Sudden Fear, playing a playwright whose husband is trying to kill her. She wasn't just the star, she helped get the movie made by convincing the studio to buy the story and cast her in it. The film was a hit, and Joan earned her third Oscar nomination. She was 47 at the time, proving once again that age didn't matter when it came to her talent. In 1955, Joan Crawford played a rich widow in Female on the Beach. The movie made more than $2.5 million, showing that people still loved her. Then, in 1964, she played Lucy Harbin in Strait Jacket. Lucy was a woman who spent 20 years in a mental hospital after killing her husband. Joan made the character both scary and sad, which got her a lot of praise and made her a horror legend. Joan was brave when it came to choosing roles. In 1956, when she was 51, she starred in Autumn Leaves. She played a lonely woman who fell in love with a younger man. The movie talked about things like big age gaps and mental illness, topics that most movies avoided back then. By taking these roles, Joan stayed popular and proved older actresses could still succeed in Hollywood, even when many were pushed aside. One of her most famous movies was Whatever Happened to Baby Jane? In 1962. She starred with Bette Davis, her longtime rival. The movie came out on Halloween and was about two aging sisters who had a twisted, dark relationship. It brought both Joan and Bette back into the spotlight and started a new kind of horror movie featuring older stars. But working on the film wasn't easy. Joan and Bette didn't get along. During one scene, Joan made herself so heavy by putting rocks in her pockets that Bette hurt her back trying to drag her. Even with all the drama, the movie was a huge hit, earning $9 million when it only cost less than $1 million to make. It was nominated for 5 Oscars, but Joan didn't get a nomination. Instead, when Anne Bancroft won for The Miracle Worker and couldn't be there, Joan stepped in to accept the award, stealing the moment from Bette. After Baby Jane, Joan acted in more horror movies like Strait Jacket and I Saw What You Did. These movies were inspired by the success of Baby Jane. The film is still loved by fans today, and its famous line, "But you are, Blanche. You are in that chair," is often quoted. Joan's last movie was Trog in 1970. She played a scientist who discovers a caveman. The movie was made on a very small budget, and Joan even brought her own clothes for her character. There's one funny scene where she teaches the caveman to play with toys, which many people found silly. The movie didn't do well, and critics hated it. But Joan gave it her all, treating the role seriously. Later, she joked that if she couldn't end her career with a bang, she was fine ending it with a laugh. Over time, Trog became a cult favorite, and some fans now see it as so bad, it's good. Joan also appeared on TV later in her career. In 1955, she was on General Electric Theatre. In 1959, she starred in an episode of Zane Grey Theatre, where she played a woman running from a killer. She even appeared in The Man from UNCLE in 1967, playing a villain. In 1969, she starred in a pilot for Night Gallery, directed by a young Steven Spielberg. The episode was watched by millions and proved Joan could still grab attention. On her 66th birthday in 1970, she even appeared on a comedy show, showing she didn't take herself too seriously. Joan Crawford's personal life was full of drama, just like her movies. She had 3 big marriages that made headlines. Her first husband was Douglas Fairbanks Jr., the son of a famous silent film actor. They got married on June 3, 1929, when Joan was 21 and Douglas was 19. Joan wanted his family to like her, especially his stepmother, Mary Pickford. She tried hard, taking lessons to change her accent and learning good manners, but no matter what she did, they never accepted her, and it hurt her deeply. Joan was also very ambitious, while Douglas was more laid back. This caused problems, and there were rumors that both of them cheated. After 4 years, they divorced in 1933. Her second husband was Frank Hot Tone, another actor. They got married on October 11, 1935. Before they got together, there was a love triangle with Joan and her rival, Betty Davis, both trying to win his heart. Joan won, but their marriage had a lot of problems. She had 2 miscarriages, and rumors of abuse followed them. Things got worse when Joan found him with a young actress. They divorced in 1939. Her third marriage was to Philip Terry. They got married on July 21, 1942, and adopted a son named Philip Terry Jr., but this marriage also fell apart. After 4 years, they divorced in 1946. Joan changed her son's name to Christopher Crawford. Each of her marriages was full of passion at first, but they always ended in heartbreak. Joan wanted to be a mother, but she couldn't have kids because of her miscarriages, so she turned to adoption. In 1940, she adopted her first child, Christina, but it wasn't easy. Joan wasn't allowed to adopt in California because she was single, so she used a baby broker and went to Nevada to make it legal. A year later, she adopted a baby boy, but the birth mother took him back after causing a lot of trouble for Joan. Joan was heartbroken. In 1943, she adopted another boy and named him Philip Terry Jr., though she later renamed him Christopher. In 1947, she adopted twin girls, Kathy and Cindy, after their biological mother passed away. Raising her kids came with challenges, but Joan kept going. Joan also struggled with drinking for a big part of her life. It started in the late 1930s during her second marriage. By the 1940s, it became a serious problem. Joan loved vodka, calling it her morning cocktail, and she often drank on movie sets. Even her co-stars noticed, like Betty Davis, who worked with her on Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Her drinking also hurt her relationships with her children. In Christina's book Mommy Dearest, she described Joan's behavior as abusive when she drank. Some people have questioned the truth of that book, but Joan's drinking did cause tension at home. Her drinking also hurt her career. By the 1960s, movie producers had to ask her to promise not to drink while filming. It even caused trouble in her work with Pepsi Cola, where people said she hid vodka in Pepsi bottles at meetings. But in 1974, after a bad fall, Joan quit drinking completely. She also stopped smoking. This showed her strength and determination, which helped her survive many challenges in her life. Joan Crawford's life was glamorous, but her death left behind a story filled with drama and controversy. When she passed away on May 10, 1977, her estate was valued at about $2 million, which would be worth over $10 million today. This wealth was more than just her earnings as a legendary actress of Hollywood's golden age. Joan was also smart with money and had other sources of income. A big part of her fortune came from her role with the Pepsi Cola Company, where she served on the board and later became a spokesperson after marrying its CEO, Alfred Steele, in 1955. Her estate included more than just cash. She owned valuable things like her Manhattan apartment on East 69th Street, where she spent her final years, and lots of Hollywood memorabilia, including her 1946 Academy Award for Mildred Pierce. That Oscar alone later sold for $426,000 in 1993. Joan also had a collection of jewelry, furs, and other treasures collected during her 50-year career. The most shocking part of Joan's estate was her will, signed just months before her death. It excluded two of her children, Christina and Christopher. The will included a chilling clause that read, "It is my intention to make no provision herein for my son Christopher or my daughter Christina for reasons which are well known to them." This statement shocked many because Joan's adoption of her children had been publicized as part of her perfect Hollywood family image. She had adopted Christina in 1940, Christopher in 1943, and twins Kathy and Cindy in 1947. But the will revealed that her relationship with Christina and Christopher had deep problems. The rest of Joan's estate was split between her younger daughters, Kathy and Cindy, and several charities. Kathy received the largest share, including Joan's personal property and memorabilia. This included the Mildred Pierce Oscar, which Kathy later sold at auction. Both Kathy and Cindy were each given trust funds of $777,500, which is about $380,000 in today's money. Joan also showed her philanthropic side in her will. She left significant amounts to charities like the American Cancer Society, the Muscular Dystrophy Association, the USO, and the Motion Picture Home for Retired Film Workers. She had been deeply involved in these causes during her life. Joan also set aside $35,000 for her secretary, Betty Barker, to thank her for years of loyalty, and smaller amounts for friends and staff who had been close to her. However, the decision to cut Christina and Christopher out of the will led to a bitter legal fight. Just 5 months after Joan's death, they sued to challenge the will. The siblings claimed that Joan wasn't mentally fit when she wrote her will and that Kathy and her husband had influenced her unfairly. They pointed to Joan's drinking in her later years as evidence of poor judgment. The case brought forward many people who had known Joan during her final years and dragged family secrets into public view. After nearly 2 years, the legal fight ended in a settlement in July 1979. Christina and Christopher each received $227,500, a fraction of the $2 million estate. While they didn't get an equal share, the settlement gave them some acknowledgement of their claims. Joan Crawford bought her home at 426 North Bristol Avenue in Brentwood, Los Angeles, during the summer of 1928 for $57,500. She lovingly called it El Jodo, combining her name with her first husband's, Douglas Fairbanks Jr. This house became her main home for nearly 30 years until 1956. The mansion, originally a Spanish-style villa, was renovated and expanded over the years into a Georgian-style estate. It became a symbol of Hollywood glamour and matched Crawford's rising stardom. El Jodo was where Crawford lived through the peak of her career, transitioning from silent films to talkies and even winning her Oscar for Mildred Pierce in 1945. The house saw countless Hollywood parties with guests like Clark Gable, Marlene Dietrich, and Barbara Stanwyck. It was also the setting for the iconic moment when she accepted her Oscar while lying in bed, pretending to be sick, with photographers capturing the scene. Crawford frequently made upgrades to the mansion. In 1935, she added a large dining room, a new kitchen wing, and a 3-car garage. By 1937, the estate included a combined badminton and tennis court, a swimming pool, and a private theater for screening films. Crawford's obsession with cleanliness was well known. She insisted the house be scrubbed daily with disinfectant. Her perfectionism even extended to her closets. She famously fired a maid for using wire hangers instead of padded ones, an incident that later became part of pop culture. By the time Crawford left in 1956, the mansion spanned 11,558 square feet, with 6 bedrooms and 10 bathrooms. Inside, it featured lavish decor with silk brocade and gold accents. The grand foyer had a sweeping staircase where Crawford often made dramatic entrances for her guests. The living room was enormous, with custom furniture and a grand piano. The dining room seated 20 people, perfect for her extravagant dinner parties. Upstairs, her master suite included a sitting room, a dressing room, and a marble bathroom with a sunken tub. Each guest bedroom had its own bathroom, and the house also had a wood-paneled library, a modern kitchen for the time, and a wine cellar. Outside, the Olympic-sized pool and sun terrace were perfect for entertaining, and the pool house and private theater added to the estate's luxurious feel. While El Jodo symbolized Hollywood glamour, it allegedly hid a darker side. In 1978, Crawford's adopted daughter Christina published Mommy Dearest, a memoir that described alleged abuse and neglect in the mansion. Christina claimed her mother once flew into a rage over wire hangers in her closet, tearing clothes off them and beating her while shouting, "No wire hangers ever." She also wrote that Joan would force her to eat rare meat and lock her in the dining room for hours if she refused. The basement, Christina alleged, was sometimes used to punish her with confinement. These stories painted Crawford as volatile, with violent outbursts and a strict cleaning obsession. However, the claims in Mommy Dearest remain controversial. Joan's other adopted children, Kathy and Cindy, denied the abuse allegations and described her as loving and devoted. Regardless of what was true, the book forever changed how people viewed El Jodo. It became less a glamorous mansion and more a house of unsettling stories. Even after Crawford's time there, El Jodo's reputation continued to grow, partly because of reports of paranormal activity. Over the years, strange events were said to occur inside the house. One of the most famous involved a living room wall that reportedly burst into blue flames twice in the 1940s and 1950s. The Beverly Hills Fire Department could not explain the phenomenon. Witnesses claimed the fires reappeared in the same spot as recently as the 1980s. Visitors also reported seeing a ghostly figure resembling Crawford, often in a flowing white dress near the staircase or her old bedroom. Some even claimed to hear the sound of a typewriter coming from the study where Crawford used to write letters. In 1989, a spiritual investigator, Reverend Rosalind Bruera, was brought in to examine the house. She described it as a hub for spiritual energy, sensing everything from Hollywood spirits to gangsters and politicians. There were even eerie rumors of bodies buried in the basement, although no evidence of this was ever found. These ghost stories kept El Jodo a subject of fascination, adding to its already legendary status as both a symbol of old Hollywood and a place of lingering mystery.